So I am going to keep this talk unbiased by talking in generalities, but I would highly encourage you, if functional precision medicine is of interest, to look at those assays that have been published and that have been validated with clinical studies. So I put this statement up here because a lot of what I am a scientist, so a lot of what I see in clinician action is really a lot of narrowing down of classifications for individual patients so that we can get to a stage where you have a treatment that is perfect for that individual patient. That becomes very difficult sometimes. And so what I want to do with this presentation is really provide you with another added tool, which is functional precision medicine. So I'm going to contrast that a little bit with what we know of as precision medicine now, and then hopefully end this with a discussion of how you can implement this for in the field of gliomas. So I like to start with a hypothetical pool of 100 patients, and we're going to work through these patients and show the differences in how precision medicine can narrow it down, and then how functional precision medicine can come in and give an added benefit to that precision medicine. So if we narrow it down just by pathology, which is the first stage generally, right? So you, in this hypothetical population, we've narrowed it down to about 49 patients. So we've taken about half the population. They all have the same general pathology. What this works well with is for standard of care agents, your cytotoxic agents, drugs like platinums, Taxols for glioma, temozolomide. And so we're going to move forward with this population pool. So then we narrow it down by biomarker expression. For ovarian cancer, that might be CA125, breast cancer, hormone receptor expression, HER2. For GBM, you might be looking at things like IDH mutation, MGMT, methylation, and use those to narrow down your population even more. So in this case, we've now narrowed down to 24 patients. And we're going to now look at this pool of patients from a traditional precision medicine standpoint. So what is precision medicine? I think the FDA actually has a really good definition of it, in that it takes into account the differences in genes, environment, and lifestyle. So it's really designed to target the right treatment to the right patient at the right time. There are pros and cons to everything that is done, including precision medicine. The pros really are that there's some ease of use of implementation of it in the clinic, and that it can be done oftentimes with FFPE samples, which are generally always generated within the pathology labs. It's nice because it allows for the identification of a targeted therapy, which gives you a more specific therapy than a general chemotherapeutic. However, it's relatively generalized to the population in that if you have a mutation that is actionable, you can get that therapy, but there's no real good definition within that pool of patients as to whether or not they're going to respond to that therapy. So some general examples of these are NGS panels that I think most of you are probably used to looking at. So how does it work? Tumor, tissue, blood is received at a testing facility, DNA is extracted and sequenced, and then the data is generated, a report is then submitted that identifies mutations. And this is where it becomes almost like a numbers game, unfortunately, in that there are very few patients that have what are called actionable mutations. So most patients have a mutation, but most mutations don't have a therapy associated with them. So even though you've identified mutations, you have not identified a drug that will help that patient. And I'm just going to show quickly, this is from the NCI MATCH study, which was a study basically enrolled thousands of patients, looked for actionable mutations, and then could assign those patients to trials dependent upon their actionable mutations. So you can see I've highlighted the CNS population within the 5,500 patients that were screened within the study, and about 37% of those screened patients were able to be assigned to a trial. Now, what I'm not going to get into is how successful those trials were, aside from saying that most of them were not overly successful with maybe 20 to 40% response rates. So a lot of patients, while being assigned to a trial based on a mutation that should have been affected by a targeted therapy, they did not actually see a lot of benefit from that therapy. So if we move back to our hypothetical population of patients, if we can identify those that have one mutation, in this case, I've got a population of 10 patients, they all have the same mutation, we can treat them with the targeted therapy. But in this case, which is not overly, it's not unknown and unseen, only about 3 of the patients actually respond to the therapy. So you've got 7 patients that are getting a targeted therapy that you had no way of knowing beforehand they weren't going to respond to it. So what are the outcomes here? 3 patients have received a therapy they respond to. 7 patients have received a therapy they do not respond to. 39 of the patients are still receiving standard of care. And we all know that standard of care is not 100% either. So there's a percentage of those patients that aren't going to respond to their standard of care therapy. So in this hypothetical pool, 26 patients have not received an effective therapy. And what we want to do with functional precision medicine is really go in and help that and make that number smaller. So what is functional precision medicine? What is functional precision medicine? So in this case, what we're doing is we're taking live tumor cells from each individual, and we are directly putting them in contact with the drugs that they could be receiving. So it could be large panels of drugs, small panels of drugs. It's really drug agnostic. So the pros on this are that you have direct evidence of individual patients' tumor cell death due to a specific drug. Like I mentioned, the tests are usually drug compound agnostic. When you get into more complex drugs or mechanisms of actions like immunotherapies, it does require more science going into the assays, so it can become more complex. But in general, standard chemotherapies, standard cytotoxic agents, cytostatic agents, and targeted therapies can all be tested within these platforms. The major con for this platform is that it requires live cells and enough cellular material to test. This makes it incredibly difficult to implement within a clinical setting, especially from my own perspective. Implementing in the perspective of glioblastoma is incredibly difficult because a lot of times it's unclear that the patients have a glioblastoma before they have surgery. So there are drawbacks in terms of just being able to perform these tests and having the samples to do that. The other con is that each drug must be validated. So it's not a general mutation associated with the therapy, as in precision medicine. It's a direct placement and association with drugs. So you have to validate each compound. So there's a lot of cell-based assays out there. There have been a lot of cell-based assays out there in the past that have not gone too well, and those are usually because they have relied upon 2D cell culture. The new assays are reliant upon 3D cell culture, which is far more relevant to in vivo biology and has been shown numerous times to be able to model in vivo human biology far better than mice or 2D cell culture based assays. So precision medicine works very much the same way, or functional precision medicine works very much the same way. Tumor tissue, blood received by a testing facility. In this case, cells are isolated, not DNA, and then drug is applied. Then the drug response data is analyzed and response categorization can occur. And then just like with a personalized medicine mutation profile, you get a report with response categorizations for all the drugs tested. And you get a drug response prediction, or you get basically a non-drug response prediction, which means the patient sample couldn't be tested. However, unlike precision medicine, where I was showing 27 to 37% with an actionable mutation and then the rest without, most functional precision medicine assays are 90 to 95% successful. So if we go back to our 49 patients that we've narrowed down, we're actually able to successfully test about 44% of them. And a successful test is both a non-response and a response, because if you know that they're not going to respond to a therapy, it's just as useful as knowing if they will. So I'm going to give some examples. So this is example number 1. So red patients are non-responders, green patients are responders. This is standard chemotherapy. This is a standard chemo that works 50% of the time. So the test, when it tests 44 patients, can show 22 of them responding, 22 of them not responding. So you know which individual patient is going to respond or not respond to those therapies, rather than just playing a 50-50 game. In the second example, this drug works 75% of the time. So now you can identify those 25% of those patients that aren't going to respond, and you can give them something else. And then in my third example, it's the opposite. So about 25% of patients respond and the rest don't. And once again, you can identify them. The importance of this is that really, we've all seen Kaplan-Meier curves. They're never flat lines. There's always patient populations at either end of the spectrum on a Kaplan-Meier, and to be able to identify those patients outside of the median would be very helpful to know how to direct their therapy. So I mentioned functional precision medicine and precision medicine can work together. There's no reason they have to be separate. So if we take the same 10 patients that I mentioned earlier that had a functional mutation or an actionable mutation, and we look at them beyond just the actionable mutation, we look at the targeted therapy response for each patient, we can identify those 3 patients that would have responded and the 7 that would not. So then you can make an educated decision on whether or not to still give them the targeted therapy or to try something else. So this changes the outcome. So now 90 to 95% of patients have an actionable response readout. They're either responders or non-responders to a panel of drugs. So you can make a better choice. Patients with no readout to response can make an educated decision about care, which can include enrollment in clinical trials. Additionally, as these assays get more and more validated, they can be validated into clinical trials to help with patient selection within those trials. So I'm going to talk specifically about newly diagnosed HGG and a little bit about recurrent GBM. So when we're narrowing the patient population within high-grade gliomas, you're looking at histology, GBM, anaplastic astrocytoma, et cetera, who will fare better, who will fare worse. You're looking at IDH mutational status. You're looking at MGMT methylation. MGMT methylated patients should respond better to standard TMZ than unmethylated patients. From a precision medicine standpoint, I'm just listing examples, but you could be looking at ALK fusions, EGFR mutations, et cetera, to see what agents to give them, because some of them will actually respond pretty well to those targeted therapies. But then we talk about the actual how the patient is treated. And so newly diagnosed GBM, MGMT methylated, get radiation concurrent TMZ, followed by adjuvant TMZ. Newly diagnosed MGMT unmethylated can go to a clinical trial, or they can still get the same treatment, so radiation concurrent TMZ, even though the data has shown that MGMT unmethylated patients tend to not fare as well on TMZ. And then for recurrent GBM, there's no specific guidelines to direct therapy choice. So you're basically left with a pool of therapies to choose from with very little to no guidance. So this comes to my big point, and this is why we believe functional precision medicine in the care of GBM patients is really important. So even though MGMT methylated patients tend to do better on standard of care than unmethylated, there are still methylated patients that do not respond, and there are still unmethylated patients that do respond. And it would be really nice to be able to tell those patients, or to be able to pick out which of those patients would be. So how can functional precision medicine help? For responders to TMZ, we can find the unmethylated MGMT patients that will respond to standard of care, and you can put them on it. For the non-responders, you can find both the methylated ones that won't respond and the unmethylated, and you can put them on something else, or you can provide confidence to move to a clinical trial. You can also, since it's usually a panel of drugs, oftentimes it will identify other compounds that they would probably respond to according to the test results. Very, very rarely do we find a patient that responds to absolutely nothing. For recurrent patients, you can identify salvage agents that they will respond to and use that. We've seen that happen numerous times, very successfully. And then for clinical studies, you can use it for patient stratification after validation of the assay for those drugs. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your attention. I think my biggest point is that if you are going to look at functional precision medicine, I highly advise you to look for published data and for validated assays. A lot of companies like to make comments about their assays being able to predict response without actually showing the evidence of that prediction. So I think that is incredibly important.
Tessa, thank you so much for your talk. I think this is a good technology for patients, and we've sent several specimens for recurrent glioblastoma, especially for Kiatech, to see if there is one of the drugs on your panel could help the patients. My own research group has for a long time been doing high throughput drug screening, and it is amazing that you can often find a person's glioblastoma tumor sensitive to some type of unusual drug that may not have any chemotherapeutic properties. So I think this unbiased screening and investigation is a good way to approach these tumors in combination with all the other therapies we're talking about today. So thank you very much. I appreciate your talk.
Thank you.